Welcome to Ceasefire, where civics meet civility and engagement meets empowerment. Ceasefire is hosted by former Boerne ISD trustee and owner of the Boerne Bookshop, Dale Adams, and by former Boerne City Council member and local insurance agent, Ron Cisneros.
Welcome to Ceasefire. My name is Dale Adams.
And I'm Ron Cisneros.
And today we've got a special guest, Mayor Frank Ritchie, Mayor of City of Boerne. Welcome, Mayor Ritchie.
Thanks, Dale, for having me. I appreciate it, Ron. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I've known Frank, I don't know, about a decade now.
At least.
Local business owner. You've got Ritchie Automotive. Mm-hmm. And I think I met you through Emmaus.
Yes, sir.
If I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. You're also a pastor.
Yes, sir.
At Spring Creek
United Methodist Church.
All right. And then, sometime not too long ago, you decided you were going to get into the world of politics. And,
what fun.
Run for mayor of Boerne.
Right.
Let's start there, man. What got into your head?
It's really a crazy story. If you know me, I've been part of the Boerne community since we moved here. My wife's a Boerne graduate, 1995 graduate. And through my business and through the church and through the different ministries that I'm a part of, and my kids in athletics, I've coached every sport through the rec programs, through the soccer clubs, through the football programs. Just been involved in the community since I've been here. And so we do a lot of support through our business and through the church. And I posed a question to someone online, which will teach me not to pose questions online, about just if nobody runs for mayor, what would happen? We just don't have a mayor, or does somebody appoint it? And a bunch of people fired back, hey, you'd be great for the mayor of Boerne. And I'm like, I'm not the mayor of Boerne. I'm just asking for a friend type question. Yeah, you know what I mean? You can't ask those questions. And it started getting some steam in the community, and people started coming by the business, asking me if I would run and this, that, and the other. And as you said, I'm a pastor, I'm a business owner, I'm a soccer coach, a football coach. I do lots of stuff in the community. I'm pretty active, and I said, I don't know if I have time. But I said, let me pray about it, think about it. And so that's really what I did. My wife and I talked about it. My weekly Bible study group, my Emmaus reunion group, I had everybody praying about, is this where God's leading me? And for me as a man of faith, I trust in the Spirit a lot. Mm-hmm. And if God leads me somewhere, then I trust that God's going to take me there for a reason. And after some discernment, that was the response I got. I said, God, if this is where you want me, then make a way. And that's why when I campaigned, I said, I'm not taking any donations. If you want me at this seat at the city council as the mayor of Boerne, Texas, then put me there. And here I am 18 months later as the mayor of Boerne.
I'm going to actually jump ahead because I'm interested in what you're talking about, letting God lead the way for you. Mm-hmm. How do you incorporate, or do you incorporate your ministry into your role as mayor?
So above anything, before anything, I'm a child of God and I'm a disciple for Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. So I put ministry into everything we do. Being a father is ministry, being a husband is ministry, being a business owner, being a friend is ministry. So absolutely, I put ministry in everything I do. Is at the heart. As a mayor of Boerne, I discern, is this what's best for the community, right? Not me, not what Frank wants, not what certain individuals want. Is this what's best for our communities, and is this something that leads in a godly way? And so I try to make that my first decision of everything, right? Would this be where God would want me to lead and how God would want me to lead? And so ministry is involved in everything that I do. I don't shy away from that 100%. Right. And it plays a big factor in how I, quote, wrote my role as mayor, for sure.
Okay. When over the years, before I was on council, while I was on council, and since I left council, I've known a lot of council members, and just about everyone, I say just about, Bryce Bodie I'm going to hold as the exception, but everybody comes in with an idea of something they want to accomplish, something that they could be very passionate about it, or it's just something gnawing on them. I want to get X, Y, and Z done.
We call that
an agenda, right? Yeah, and it's more than an agenda sometimes. It's like a burning, passion. And then something happens, something transformative. They come out of there and they're like, oh my gosh, like they're either thankful that they weren't able to establish their agenda, or they realized they couldn't establish their agenda, or something happens in that process. Could you describe maybe something that motivated you as you were going in, and now almost at the end of your first term, you're like, gosh, that wasn't ever going to work, or I learned something in this process?
Yeah, so I came in with no agenda. And I even said that early on in the race. I went to a couple of debates, and I said, look, I don't know if I'm the right guy for this position or if I'm even know what I'm doing. And the reality is I came in as mayor not knowing really a lot about city government, how it works. The first 6-7 months, I was drinking from a fire hydrant, trying to figure out what goes on, read through the city charter, the city master plan, looked at legislation, talked to a couple of attorney friends of mine that deal with city government, and said, what's my role and that type of thing. But for me, it was just, I like to sit back and learn and listen. I think humility for me is one of the biggest things that you can have. And for me, there's a difference from being humble and having humility. Being humble to me is always to remain teachable. So coming in here knowing that I don't know everything and I don't have an agenda, I ran on the idea that together we're better and together we're Boerne. And one of the things that really drove me was there was so much discourse in our community between this us and them, the city and then the county residents. And Boerne, for me as a community, is the people. And I think no matter how big we get or how small we stay or whatever the situation is, I don't ever want to lose that fact that I'm from Boerne, where I go down the street and I wave and people excuse and they help you out. And you're just welcome and you're safe and you just feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. And so if I can do that in a way that keeps our community knit together with love for neighbor, then I think that's my role. If that's the only thing that I accomplish in 2 years or 4 years or however long God has me at this seat, then it's going to be a win. I think for me, civility between groups and people is lost in the world today. We just saw that with the last election. We saw that in the last local election also. But again, I think for me is we can agree to disagree, but we need to learn to love one another in that disagreement, right? One of my favorite quotes is from John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church. And his quote is, we may not all believe alike, but we can all love alike. And I think that's a quote that we could take anywhere in the world and put it into anything aspect of our lives, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I can disagree with where your stance is on abortion or water rights or city government or big government, but that doesn't mean I need to treat you any differently with any less respect you're still a brother in Christ.
Yeah, good thoughts. You're coming to the end of this first term, and I'm not spoiling anything because you've already said it yourself. You're planning on running for a second term, or is this going to be like the first one? You're not really running so much. Is you're going to let that happen again, let it unfold? And
for me, being the mayor isn't about me. It's about the role that I have in that situation and what I do with it. And as we get closer to it's time to run again, I'm going to put my name in the ring. And if the community wants me, I'm willing to poll the community and say, hey, am I doing a good job? Am I not doing a job? Would you want me to stay here? And if the community says, no, Frank, we don't want you here, then I'm okay to bow out. Right? Again, I don't have an agenda. I just want what's best for this community and the people that I live life with and do life with. And so as long as the community supports me and wants me in that situation, thinks I'm doing a good job, then I'm there.
But you're having a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. Boerne is such a wonderful community. And I say community instead of city because, again, there's a misunderstanding. Right. So the city is 12 square miles, basically, but there's 22, almost 23,000 people in that 12 square miles. But in the 7800 zip code, there's 60,000 people that consider themselves Boerne, right? Yeah. And I consider them Boerne. My business is in Boerne County, but it's got a Boerne zip code, so I consider it a Boerne business.
Yeah.
And so trying to bring that connection to our community is, as a mayor, I have to look at what's best for the city, but also weigh in, how does that weigh into our community partners outside of the city limits, right? What effect are we having on them, right? Not to disconnect them at all. Make sure that they're part of the equation. And so I'm the voice, I think, of that.
Okay. We're a show about civic engagement and civility, and so I don't want to make a mistake here and not talk about the civic side. Let's talk about your role as mayor to help people understand what you do. You're a member of the council, but you don't vote.
Correct.
You can break a tie. That's seldom going to happen because you've got five other people sitting there. I would liken it almost to a figurehead position, but you've got some power, the power of appointments. You're picking who's sitting on the P&Z and the Historic Landmark Commission.
Correct.
What are some of the other attributes of your position that I might be missing?
I think you really nailed it on the head there, Ron. As a non-voting member of the council, I am a figurehead for the community. I am a figurehead for that council. I weigh in on what I think is best for the community. That's why, for me, community engagement is so important. Even though I don't have a vote, when we have discussions about something that's going on in the community, I listen to what the community is saying and say, okay, we have a large number that says this is not a good fit for Boerne, or a large number that says, hey, this is what we need in Boerne. And I bring that to the council members, and I'm like, this is what our community is talking about. We need more parks. We need more pickleball courts. We don't need more of this. And making sure that they're in tune to what our community wants. And then I strive to make the best decision. Now, at the end of the day, there's always two groups of people. You're never going to make everybody happy. And that's the hard part, right? Is if we make a decision for one group, then the other group is upset and, we're ruining Boerne. So it's a balancing act. But for me, I think the most important thing is I answer every email. I engage with the community. I'm part of the community to where they know that if they have questions, they can come to me, and I'm going to take them to the council and the city manager. I will tell you from an outsider's part looking in how city government works, and then being able to go to different cities and talk with other mayors. We are so blessed with our staff, our city staff, our workers, our city manager, and our council crew, just who we are as a community. There are so many other cities of our size, even larger, that are looking to Boerne to set the stage of how city government looks and what it should be like. I'm proud of that fact, to be a part of that.
And with that, we're going to take a quick break. This is Ceasefire with Dale and Ron. We'll be back in just a moment with Mayor Frank Ritchie of the community of Boerne. Boerne has its own bookshop. In fact, it's called the Boerne Bookshop. Hi, I'm Dale Adams, inviting you to get lost. Get lost in a good book in our relaxed and casual atmosphere. We have a wide and eclectic selection in the Boerne Bookshop, and we pride ourselves on finding what you're looking for. We do author meet and greets, host writing workshops, and can connect you with a good book club. And your young ones will absolutely love our kids section at the Boerne Bookshop. And while we want you to get lost, we're easy to find, as we're in the heart of Boerne at the back of the Richter Tavern building. We are the Boerne Bookshop. Welcome back to Ceasefire with Dale and Ron, brought to you by the Boerne Bookshop. And today I've got a couple of books, and they're put out actually by the Genealogical Society of Kendall County, and it's the 51st Families of Kendall County, Texas, Volume 1, and 51st Families of Kendall County, Texas, Volume 2. And basically, they've collected the history of the oldest families in the county. And so there's a lot of Boerne history here and Kendall County history in here, and it's pretty neat, and we've got them at the Boerne Bookshop. Mayor Ritchie, so got a question for you.
Yeah, Dale.
Are we ever going to get a roundabout in Boerne?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to start on that project next year. The first roundabout's going to be the Johns Road intersection there by Boerne Middle School North. Right?
Oh, okay.
Oh, I hadn't even thought of that.
That was part of School Street and Johns Road right there.
Yeah.
That was part of the bond project.
Uh-huh.
So we're going to start breaking ground on that next year, like in the spring as school's lighting out. At the same time, we're also looking at maybe doing a roundabout out there at the new city park that's going at the north end of Adler.
Okay.
So,
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
so we're going to try them out.
From my time being in the service and traveling,
Yeah, likewise.
roundabouts are a great traffic manipulator, so to speak. They keep the flow going. People just learn how to drive on them. And like everything, change is difficult.
Yeah, they definitely can fill a role in certain spots. And
Absolutely.
I think we've got several of those.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. I'm glad to hear that, actually. Lyndon Johnson once said, "When the burdens of the presidency seem unusually heavy, I always remind myself it could be worse. I could be a mayor." Do you ever find that there is an intractable problem that it just won't get resolved because the opposing sides are just too entrenched and too obsessed with their side?
Oh, absolutely. We see that in today's world in a lot of subjects.
Yeah.
There's extreme measures on both sides. There's people in the middle. I think that the world is gray, right? Yeah. Nothing's black and white anymore, depending on what subject you're talking about. But I think cooler heads can prevail. Diplomacy is alive and well in our world when people are willing to work at it. Yeah. When I said having heads or people coming in that are willing to work for that, there has to be some concessions on both sides.
And some people don't seem to understand that.
No, they don't.
Yeah,
it's the same thing in city government. Just last year, my first year as a mayor, we worked with the short-term rental agreement for the code policies. Mm-hmm. We went back and forth for several months with the owners, right, that want them, and the people that live in the communities to say we don't want them. And I think through several months of work, we were able to make some concessions on both sides and come together with an agreement that makes sense for the community. But it will change over time. It's not set in stone. We're going to start here by being able to have those conversations and be like, look, this is somewhere where we're going to start. It doesn't mean it's the end all be all. Yeah. But both parties were able to make some concessions. The city made some concessions. The owners, the communities did. And so it took some time. But I think it's a great example of people coming together and being willing to listen to the other side.
Yeah.
If you come in with an agenda and you're hardcore set on something, sometimes I get a better response talking to the wall.
I'm glad that you've had that experience, because I remember that was a tough discussion, but I'm glad it got resolved through compromise and that you
right.
went through
Yeah.
it. So
and again, both parties weren't 100% happy with the agreement.
But that's the way life is.
And that's the thing that I've learned in government is no matter what we do, you're never going to make everybody happy, right? So that's why it's so important that the decisions that I help make or I influence, my first mindset is always, is this what's best for the community of Boerne? Yeah. Right? I'm not in this seat because I don't want Boerne to change today, right? I want to know my granddaughter is 18 months and my son and daughter-in-law live here in Boerne, and they're going to raise her in Boerne and my future grandchildren. So I want to know what Boerne is going to look like in 20 years down the road. Yeah. And that's my role here, is what the future is. Because right now Boerne is a great place, right? We just need to just make sure that we can maintain it for 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road.
Yeah. Mayor, you were talking earlier about how you use the words Boerne community, and so you were talking about what that looks like to you, and it's more than just the city limits. I've heard you say that before, and there are certainly some challenges when you're looking at what's best for the city of Boerne, and then considering the people that live outside the city limits. And sometimes you have these opposing factions. For example, people outside the city limits that are opposed to a bypass, right? And I get that. You want to be in the county. You want to have that county way of life. And yet at the same time, you want to use an HEB or some pickleball courts or the Home Depot, and they don't build those things in rural areas. They build them in towns and cities, right? And so I think oftentimes when you're talking to constituents, at least this was my experience, is that you're trying to get them to understand that there are two perspectives, and they both need each other.
Correct.
Right? We need them as much as they need us.
Absolutely.
And trying to find that common ground. As more than just a mayor, as a pastor, do you have difficulty conveying that to people, or do you find it to be more difficult today than it might have been in the past?
So I will tell you, in face-to-face and one-on-one conversations, it's a lot easier to get that message across.
I believe it.
Correct. Social media, even email, we are so disconnected as a society because of those two things, right? Yep. And then things get so misinterpreted, even in a text or an email. It comes across as, oh, this guy's brash, but it's really not. When you get to meet the person face-to-face, that's just how they communicate. Yeah, right? Yeah. I always say, if you have a problem, you have a situation, I am more willing to sit down and talk about it. But I've had a lot of those conversations with members of our community that live in the county. And, hey, I don't want somebody building a road through my property. And I'm like, that's never been our goal. It's not our plan. TxDOT is a whole nother animal, right? Yeah. But the fact that we're working with the county right now, and we're working with TxDOT, on some of these intersections to make some changes, I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is coming together with the county representatives and the city representatives and saying, how do we make this manageable, make this productive for the community and the city? Because you're right, there are no ball fields in the county. Right. There are no pickleball courts. There are no city parks. There's everything that for people who want to come and play and be part of a community, you have to come into Boerne. And then you have the citizens of Boerne, the residents that are like, we can't even use our own facilities because we have all these other individuals from outside the city limits coming in the county, right? Right. And so you see that with Northrop Ballpark, right? The Little League is going to explode this spring. Hats off to our Boerne boys for a great job that they did. Yeah. But I think they're going to expect probably another 1,000 kids coming into the Boerne Little League program. So how do we manage that? Because not all those kids live inside the city, right? And so it's the same thing with, like you were talking about, with the people coming from the county into the city. We're still one community. And so we got to learn to live and play with one another and do it respectfully. For me, there's not an us versus them mentality. I've lived both. I lived in Boerne for the first 12 or 13 years. Then I moved out into the county for 5 years and moved back into the city. Been here the last 6 years inside the city limits. And so I see both aspects of it, and I understand it. But you're right. I use more of the city's infrastructure and facilities than I ever did in the county. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so I would encourage people to get involved. That is the biggest thing. A lot of people have ideas and thought processes, and they come to somebody or they come to me, and then they don't want to implement them. This is a great idea. Why don't you implement it? I'm like, I got a lot of other things to administrate our church. Members will come up to me and say, Pastor, I got this great idea for this ministry, and my job as a pastor is not to do the ministry, is to help equip you to do ministry, right? And
people understand that.
And I'm like, absolutely. They're like, well, why don't you start that? I'm like, I'm not going to start that, but I'm going to get you a team of people, And God put that on your heart.
Yeah.
So I'm going to help you facilitate that. And I think that's my role as mayor, as a community, right? I mean, if you've got ideas, suggestions, I'm going to help you get connected where you can serve and how you can be a vital part of what's going on in our community, and then instead of a sounding board on social media.
Yeah. Getting involved really does open your eyes. It helps you have a better understanding of whatever it is, whether it's Rotary or your church or civic government. And I think it gives you a wider perspective of what's happening, what can be done, and what cannot be done or should not be done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, do you have anything that you learned going in there that you didn't know, like some aha moment when you got in there? Oh, I can't do that,
Oh, absolutely. There's been several of those, actually. I mean, you look at our water conservation, one of the measures that we're trying to implement, and people ask, if there's so much water, why are we still in stage 2 restrictions? And I'm like, because we want to be conservative. We want to be smart with our water, right? And it's also thankful for the people back in the 70s and 80s that made those contracts with GBRA and the people that implemented the wastewater plants. Those people were thinking for the future because they knew in 1970 and 1980 that growth was coming to Texas. And so being forward thinking, knowing why we're in stage 2, and then go, why aren't we in stage 4? Right? I get that question a lot. And I'm like, stop looking at the number and look at the restrictions. Our stage 2 is the same restrictions as most city stage 4. And so people get hung up on numbers way too much, and then they don't want to inform themselves. They just look at a number and go, Cow Creek's here, and we're only here. And so that's just one example. And another example would be the building moratorium. People asked me when I first got elected, can we stop the building? And the reality is, when you start looking at state legislation, Austin is saying Texas is going to grow, and we want Texas to grow. So we're battling the giant in Austin, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's a small community. It's a David versus Goliath type of thing. But we don't have a rock to throw. But so I looked into all of that. We brought it to council. We had an open meeting on about it and said none of our resources are stressed because we're not using our allotment from GBRA. So we still have a big reserve there that we're not using. So therefore, we can't say that we need to build a moratorium. But what we can do is control what comes in Boerne in the future. And people saying, we ask you to stop development and growth. And I'm like, and we're working on that. Hats off to our council and our city manager and our code department and our planning and zoning. Because if you look over the last 2 years, we've really slowed down the development and the growth. Right now, is there stuff still getting built? Absolutely. But some of the stuff has been on the books for 6, 7, 8, 9 years, and the developers are just now coming forward with the ideas to build these things. And we can't stop that, right? We could go back and say, we're not going to allow you to do that, and then we're going to probably get sued. Yeah. And then we're going to cost the city millions of dollars, and then our taxes are going to go up, and they're going to go, why did you do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's a catch-22. So people are saying we're still seeing all this growth. We're always going to see new things coming in. But the reality is we are slowing things down. The city of Boerne is only growing at 5 to 6% year to year from now. Kendall County in the state of Texas is growing at 15 to 20%.
Yeah.
And so as the mayor and as the council, what we're looking at is, again, the city's only 12 square miles. So we don't have a lot of free land to do anything with. And what's going to come is going to be economic development. Right. We're not looking for housing. We're not looking for apartments because we know that we're going to need revenue for the city to maintain the exemplary services that we have. And so to keep the fire and the police top notch, to keep our streets and parks up to date, we're going to need smart economic growth, right? Not more residential.
Do you find that as the city tries to manage the growth or slow it down a little bit, that it just crops up more in the county?
Yes and no. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, as long as some development can get water from somewhere, and when you have for-profit water organizations like Texas Water, right, as long as they're going to be supplied water, whatever, they're going to find the most available place and they're going to build. Yeah. And so you're going to see, I think, in the near future, next 10 years, you're going to see an uptick in growth out in the county areas. One, because there's less restrictions, less guidelines, not just Kendall County, but Kerr County, pretty much Blanco County. But it's going to come, and look at New Braunfels, what's happened there with the crazy amount of growth, right? New Braunfels wasn't always that big. The development came outside of that, and then the city just grew into it. Yeah. San Antonio's inching its way down I-10, and there's nothing that we can do about that.
Dale, I think that's an interesting question because it would make me think, when the state took away a city's ability to annex, did we just move the anthill somewhere else and just say, okay, the growth is going to happen anyway? Yeah. And now it's happening in a way that the city has no control over.
Correct. Yeah.
Maybe that wasn't such a bright idea.
Yeah, but when you can't annex, and now with the legislation, which probably will pass with being able to get rid of the ETJs altogether.
Yeah.
Austin is opening up to this idea of development and growth. And
yeah.
If cities start losing that ability to have some type of oversight, and I'm not saying every city, some cities want to grow. And so what I've learned in life, right, in ministry and just as a business member, just as a person, right, if something's not growing, it's dying.
Yeah.
And then you can drive up 281, you can drive up 35, and you see these small towns that just said, we're not going to do anything, and they're boarded up signs.
Yeah.
And it's not that we want to grow exponentially, but the reality is at some point we are going to grow, but we have to say so in Boerne. We have a wonderful community, a great environment, great people. And so now we're at a point where we can say, we want you to come to our community, or sorry, we don't want you to come to our community.
Right.
Okay, well, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you, Mayor Ritchie, for coming and visiting with us.
My pleasure.
Enlightening conversation. This is Ceasefire with Dale and Ron, brought to you by the Boerne Bookshop. And if you missed any of that, you can always go to BoerneRadio.com and check out all of our episodes. And we'll see you next week.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me.